Hey, Bomb Squad. If you're a comedian or a podcaster looking for an affordable website solution with a modern look, then we recommend Puck's Hub. With a Puck's Hub website, you can set up your new website in minutes with easy-to-use pre-built templates. Puck's Hub websites are customizable and can easily be integrated with other platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. The best part? Puck's Hub plans are only $5 per month. We use Puck's Hub for our website at the Art of Bombing podcast, and we think you should too. That's why we've partnered with Puck's Hub to offer listeners a free 60-day trial. Head over to puckshub.com to subscribe and use promo code AOBPOD at checkout for your 60-day free trial, and then pay only $5 per month after that. Take your career to the next level with your own Puck's Hub website today.
Dan Bublett's Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
Welcome to a brand new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs Callbacks, where Josh and I call back the most recent episode. This week, we are calling back episode 273 with Thomas Nichols, and it was a fun episode. I want to throw it in right now. If you haven't listened to the episode, you might want to, we'll wait for you to go back.
Just hang out.
Yep.
Let's give him a second, Dan.
Okay.
I mean, these are busy people that we're talking about here.
True story.
That's right.
Okay.
All
now
right.
that you've listened to it. Now this episode's going to make more sense because you're going to have you're going to have the context of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And what, there was a lot of great things that came out of that episode. And we're gonna focus on just only a couple topics this week because we can go really, really deep into them. One thing that you brought up was, with this episode, you pointed out that we talked a lot about his bombing story because it was a bombing story that took place while he was hosting. And you made a good point that sometimes you have to look at your set as a host differently than just a regular, set, because hosting, it's a job.
Yeah. Thomas was there, and we weren't there. So
it's true. It's
difficult for us. What got me thinking about it, is it, at the end of that conversation, it's just a mystery. Why was it like that? And he never really salvages it. Like at the end, he has, he gets demoted basically to a guest spot, which he handles really gracefully. I think that was a kind of a boon for him, and then he does it. And then I think one of his last shows was decent, he says, but it's still just, he never really figures out why. So I got to thinking, why would that be like 6 or 7 consecutive performances all kind of have the same result? And so I was thinking maybe he was analyzing his set or his performance just using different criteria.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. I mean, it really does, because and it's easy to forget this. Like we said right up top, is that being an MC, there's a skill set to it, and there's a lot of things that you have to do to be a good MC, but not necessarily means you're going to be killing on stage. And how you look at that, you have to take those things into consideration when you're analyzing an MC set versus just a regular set. Because when you're just doing a regular set, whether you're doing a guest spot or feature or hosting, or not hosting, headlining, you're just there to do your comedy. That's all you have to worry about. But when you're the MC, you're doing a job. Your job, you've got multiple duties. One, first and foremost, you are support to the rest of the comics on the show. It is your job to introduce them, and it is your job to, keep the momentum going and keep the energy of the show going so that all of the other comedians on the show, you're setting them up for success so that they can have, a good time and good sets. And part of doing that, being able to be good at that, is to realize it's not my job to be the funniest person in the room. I'm just here to let people know comedy's going to start now. It's time to get ready for comedy. I'm going to tell you my jokes, and not everybody's going to be paying attention because they're still getting their drinks, they're still getting their food. Some people are going to be tuning in, but by the time you're done as the MC, everybody should be ready to go for comedy. So when the next comic comes up, they're ready to just be part of the show and and be ready for comedy. And the other thing with being an MC, as it being a job, is that you're also representing the comedy club or the venue. And with that comes more responsibility of, especially if you're MCing in a professional comedy club atmosphere. A lot of times they have their own announcements that they want you to do. They have, certain things you have to announce at certain times. Like they'll have it broken down for the host show where at the beginning of the show, you have to do the housekeeping with the rules, no talking, no heckling, stay off your phones, jada, 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 all that stuff. And then also this week's, shows are sponsored by, or these are our drink specials. This is where the restroom is. And then throughout the show, they may have other announcements that they need you to make about upcoming shows and selling merch for the club and all the different things like that, which, becomes a duty that you have to focus on. And it makes it harder for you to focus on just your comedy, where everybody else on the show, they can just focus on the comedy because they don't have to worry about all that stuff.
Yeah. I think you make a good point about how you're somewhat employed by the venue. In Thomas's case, it was a little different. He had a headliner reach out to him and say, hey, join me on this, do this. So that's kind of who becomes the employer in that case. But for the most part, you're really repping the space. And if you're going to give yourself, like you listed all these great things, you have to make announcements. People need to know how long the drinks are available, when the kitchen closes, what to do when the checks drop. Make sure your table conversations are at a minimum. Making sure that you're not on your phones. All those different things. If you can go in, make those announcements, introduce the comedians in a way that gets people excited, make transitions in the show and provide the right energy, just do those administrative tasks correctly, and you get a 70 out of 100 just by doing those things, which is not easy, but you're there.
Yep, exactly.
Make them giggle and you get an 80, right?
Yeah.
And then
make them get an applause break as an MC.
Yeah.
You're shooting for a 90 to 100.
Yeah, if that happens, but I think the point here is if it doesn't, and a lot of times it won't, because that's not your job. Mm-hmm. Like, judge yourself on how well the show was run.
Yep.
Not how much you were at the center of it. Like I find a lot of times if I've gone back and listened to tapes of myself when I'm, recordings of when I've been an MC, not necessarily been thrilled with it because I'm doing what Thomas is doing. I'm going back and I'm listening to the quality of the jokes. Did they land? Was I funny? And in the beginning, I don't feel like I really nail it. And then I go back and listen. I'm like, well, where they really laugh at me is when I call something out in the room or do some kind of crowd work in the midst of announcements or whatever, because that's your job and that's what the audience expects of you, because that's something that came out of your mouth. I'm Josh. I'm the host. I'm going to be bringing the comics up, right?
Yeah, realistically, when you're an MC, you have there's three primary things that you're doing. One is you're making the announcements for the venue. Two, you're getting the attention of the audience who's just been sitting there waiting for the show to start. So you're getting their attention to let them know that there's comedy starting, and then you're bringing up the other acts. That's pretty much, MCing in a nutshell. And, getting their attention is doing your comedy, but it doesn't necessarily, it isn't getting their attention to like be the star of the show. It's getting their attention so that they're in the mindset that, oh, now I have to actively listen because the show is starting. I can't still
Yeah.
be talking to my friend that I came to the show with. It's time to focus on the show, and finish getting my drink orders or whatever it might be. And you bring up a good point about when you're listening back to your sets, it's easy to forget that where you listen and you're listening to how funny whether your joke landed or not, and it might have landed, but you didn't get the laugh that you thought you should. And it might be a situation, well, half the crowd's not paying attention yet because they're still finishing getting in their drink orders. So they're talking to their servers. And that's okay because that's part of what being the MC is. A lot of comics, I feel like, there are comics that are good at MCing, and I think every comic should try to, you learn a lot being an MC, and I think every comic should try to hone that skill. But it's easy to forget that as the MC, you're not the star of the show. Everybody else is the star of the show. You're just there to keep the show going and do all the things that I'd already mentioned. Not to go back and repeat that. That's why, like, when I'm emceeing, if if my set isn't all that great, I don't feel that bad about it because I know all
Yeah.
those things going into it, and I'm more like, I also look at it with the perspective of, especially if all the other comics crush and my set was just whatever, I'm like, good. The crowd's not going to remember they're going to completely forget about me.
That's
And
right.
that's fine because I'm the MC. They're there for the people on the show. And if I did a good enough job that I was able to get their attention, let them know what needed to be, let them know about the announcements and got them ready for comedy, and everybody else on the show knocks it out of the park, I did my job. That's what I was
Yeah.
there for. I'm the supporting act. And
Yep.
if I can get them up to success, you're doing a good job. Jokes aside, sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. And that's one thing I found with MCs that are really good at being MCs, and they, like you said, you kind of mix in a little bit of crowd work. You get the crowd, actively listening. But when, some of the best MCs I've seen are the ones that mix in the announcements with their comedy and the crowd work. Like they can take the announcements and make bits out of that and
There
also
you go.
use it with crowd work and, and just have that trifecta going at once. And that really builds that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good because that's what you need is energy and synergy. You got to keep that show going and keep everybody ready for comedy.
Yeah. Like, think about the room of people for a minute. If you're performing comedy in front of 100 people, there's anywhere between 30 and 60 cars in the parking lot. All those cars drove from a different set of circumstances. And when
Yeah.
you walk out there, it's 30 to 60 different conversations that are all
Yeah.
going on in the room. And you've got to gel that into one focus for comedy. It's not like we're describing an easy job. It's difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do it right, especially adding the flavor that you just mentioned, Dan, like able to take the things that you're supposed to do, have a little fun with that.
Yeah.
Make it unique to the experience they're having, and they know that. Don't worry that you didn't write those jokes or that you can't use them again. Just have
Yeah.
some fun and
Yep.
relax that you don't have to crush.
Yeah. And yeah, and again, going back to what we started this with, when you analyze that set, if you feel like you didn't do very well, like Josh said, you got to look at did you make the right announcements? Did you work them into the act? Did you do what you needed to do for the club? Did you get your intros for the comedians right? Did you pronounce their names right? Did you do all those things? Because that's what's important about being an MC, getting the names right, getting the intros right, and making sure that your comics on the show are going to succeed. And if you did all those things when you're analyzing your set from an MC perspective, then you did a good job. Now if you're just doing a guest spot, that's different. Now you have to analyze your set more objectively and maybe a little more critical than you do when you're analyzing a set as an MC.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's, and another thing we talked a lot about, and which is, I think, a very important thing, is saving money. I don't know. What are things you try to do to save money on when you're on the road? When you're on the road, how do you save money or try to save money?
Well, for me, I don't tour as much over consistent periods as you
That's how I
do.
save
So
money on going on the road. I stopped going on the road.
so much, save so much money. Well, I was going to say something that's not too dissimilar from that, which is, that I keep the drive short enough where I can come back the same night. I think that's an obvious one, but one thing that I've seen and talked to comics about, particularly in warmer weather months, are finding like a KOA. You know what that is, Campground of America, or something that's not too far away, where it's not even a hotel room. You're just pitching a tent. You're staying there. They have showers. They have like everything you need to look like you have a job, and then drive to the club. Usually you can find one close to metropolitan areas. Like I've stayed in one close to St. Louis. I've stayed in one close to Tulsa, Dallas. And those are places where people tell jokes. So you can go there and for $19 to $29 a night, have a pretty decent situation set up.
Yeah. And I've done that. That's one of the things that I do when I'm on the road. And it's probably why I'm also a little bitter about comedy shows and how a lot of them stop providing lodging these days, or like, especially for these shows that you have to drive a long ways for. But if you have to provide your own lodging, that's part of the reason I don't go out on the road as much. But if you have to, or you're doing a tour, that's a great point, doing those. And not even just the campgrounds of America. There's a lot of times RV campgrounds have tent camping. You just need to look for places where you can do tent camping or overnight camping, because sometimes you can even find those campgrounds that for free. You don't even have to pay for them, and you can just go pitch a tent. And like you said, a lot of them have showers. They have, indoor bathrooms. They have everything you need there. You can even get campsites with electricity. So if you need to charge your equipment or whatever while you're in that area, you can still do all that. A lot of them have Wi-Fi. I mean, you can pretty much do everything you need to at a campground. So that's a good way. And like you said, it can be super cheap. You look at, if you rent a hotel room, most places you're looking at a minimum of $100, even for the worst hotels. And you can go to a campground and spend 20-25 bucks a night.
Yeah. Thomas's hack is doing Airbnbs.
Yep. Which is another good way to save money.
Yeah. And in his case, I think he specifically found some Airbnbs that aren't necessarily your own place to stay.
He's renting like rooms versus like a whole like apartment situation where you're by yourself. You're usually with other people, which again, if you don't mind being with other people, that's a good way to save money.
Yeah. Yeah. Wouldn't be my cup of tea necessarily, but
mine either.
I think when it nets out, a lot of times you can find better locations at Airbnbs that are even cheaper than staying at hotels.
Personally, I would rather camp than stay with a stranger.
Yeah.
Unless that stranger's somebody like a stranger that's comedy related. You know what I mean? Like if it's somebody I've never met, but they're like a local comedian, I don't feel as weird about staying with them as, being in somebody else's house. Renting their Airbnb.
Something else that really drains the wallet is eating out for so many meals.
Yeah.
And I think it's relatively easy to pack, some yogurt and some granola, something similar to that for breakfast. Make, 4 or 5 sandwiches for lunch. And then you have 2 meals every day.
Yeah, a lot of times what I do when I'm going on the road, this is kind of one way I save money. What you're talking about, I do a lot of that. If you can afford it, get a Costco membership, get a Sam's Club membership so you can buy stuff in bulk. But then that makes good. You can get granola bars to take on the road. I usually pack a cooler. So, because sometimes I'm trying to balance my diet and eat a little healthier. So I'll bring a cooler, throw a couple pre-made salads in there. Maybe some carrots, some vegetables, or meat sticks, cheese sticks, kind of all that kind of stuff. Easy stuff for snacking on the drive, and then another good cheap source of food while you're staying somewhere is getting like ramen noodles and stuff like that, because things that are cheap but you can also cook in a microwave, because a lot of times you might not have a stove, so you just use that microwave, get that stuff. But if I'm going to a place and I know I'm going to be there for a couple of days, I usually, if I don't bring stuff with me, because say you're flying somewhere, I'll usually try to hit like a grocery store, like like a Dollar General, or you know, a dollar store, because some of those stores do sell some grocery items, so you can get them a little cheaper, whatever. But I'll hit a grocery store and stock up for a couple of days, so that way I'm not eating out all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's like one of the biggest, I think, expenditures when you're traveling as a comedian, if you eat out all the time. Because nowadays you can, I just went to lunch yesterday with my fiance. We went out to lunch and it was like $50, almost $60, and it was
Right.
lunch.
That's
After
you guys.
And it was modest. It wasn't like we went to a
Yeah.
fancy place.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it adds up quick. You have a drink,
Easily.
you have your meal, then you have your tip. Two people, lunch was $30.
Right. Yeah. It adds
And
up
that was
so fast.
one meal.
Right.
So if you're eating,
Right.
when you're on the road, if you're eating out 3 times a day, you're looking at $100 almost, and that's even if you're being conservative,
Right.
if you spend extra money on drinks and stuff. And that's another thing. If you drink and you like to have, some alcohol and stuff, go to the liquor store and buy a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Put it
And
in your room cooler or whatever. If you have a fridge, take advantage of it.
yeah. And on the episode, you guys talked about the transportation element, like some different things to save gas while you're there.
Yeah. It talked about, in his thing, he uses an electric scooter, which I think is great. I mean, that's something I thought about buying, was a portable electric bike, for doing that too, because sometimes, not just that, but it's nice to like have a different form of transportation, so you don't feel like, you're in a car all the time.
Yeah.
Like that's the other part of it. It's like, oh, on a little scooter, even though it's electric or motorized, and you're still sitting, it's not the same as being cramped in your car.
Yeah.
You feel like you can get out, because for me too, that's another thing. Like depending on where I'm at or whatever the circumstances are, when I go to a place, and the first thing I usually do when I go, if I'm going to go to a grocery store, I first look to see if I can walk to one, and then I walk to go get my supplies if I can,
Yeah.
because I don't want to
Yeah.
be in my car.
Yeah, that's great.
And
it's
like I just drove 6 hours. I don't want to be in this car any longer.
Right. So not just saving gas, but you're also like, let's have some variety in how I get places.
Yep, have a little variety, get out. Yeah, well, and it's good even like with walking a few places here, and if you can, it's good for your health, getting out and getting the fresh air, walking a little bit, get that exercise, get that movement, and you're saving gas, and it's healthy benefits. But if
Yeah.
if you can't walk to where you're going, I do think, like I said, if maybe you skateboard, bring your skateboard with you. If you have, skateboard, longboard, roller skates, whatever it is, ways to get around, and it'll definitely save on gas money. I mean, another way that I try to save on gas money, and I have a bunch of them, is a lot of gas stations have fuel reward cards. A lot of grocery stores have fuel reward cards. Sign up for them. A lot of them are free to sign up for. And sure, it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're traveling a lot, if you get 5 cents off a gallon, and you put in, and even if you only put in, 10 gallons, you're saving 50 cents, but you might fill up 4 times on a trip, that's $2. And then on the next one, you're doing $2. And before you know it, you're actually saving a lot more money than you think, you
Right.
know? And the reward cards at a lot of convenience stores, if you're going through and you're stopping at some of the same places, use those, build those points because you get a lot of free stuff with them points. A lot of times, especially with like gas stations and convenience stores, those are set up so that when you get so many points, they turn into dollars that you can redeem on purchases. So it's like you go spend your money and suddenly you have $4 or $5, and then all of a sudden now you get a free coffee, you get a free breakfast
That's
at
right.
the gas station, and that every little bit helps save that money.
I feel like gas station food is getting better in America.
Some of it is, yeah. I mean, some of it is, but still, there's still things that are going to be questionable.
Right. But like in the South, you got like the Buc-ee's places. I don't know if you've seen those, but they're gigantic. And then, in the
there's
Midwest,
a new Buc-ee's that has started construction right up the interstate from where I live.
Okay.
So we're getting a Buc-ee's up over in this area. So
yeah. But QT loves both places that have like a lot of variety.
Pilots
that you can get. Pilots.
Pilot. Yeah, a lot of the truck stops are.
Yeah, truck stop. I mean, just think about it. These are people who live on the road.
Yep.
And so it's catering to that audience. You are a trucker.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're hauling jokes from one place to another.
Yep.
You are their customer.
Exactly. Well, and another thing, you just made me think about that because of the driving and stuff. And we were talking earlier about campgrounds having showers. That's another thing too. A lot of truck stops like that, they have showers. You have to pay for them, but they do have showers and stuff. But if you have the means and you can afford to either convert or have a camper, you can convert your vehicle into a camping situation and use that. So then you always have a camper too.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go, another way to save money on stuff like that is if you are camping and you're doing the overnight camping stuff, have a membership at, a gym membership. A lot of people do that. They get a gym membership, not so they can go work out. They do it, go get an Anytime Fitness membership so they can go use it for the shower.
There you go.
When they're traveling, that's another little hack that people do to save money. I mean, there's lots of things. We could go on and on and on and on for hours for saving money. But I think, the biggest thing is, try to bring your own food or go buy groceries when you're in a place for, an extended amount of time, because that's going to save you money on going out to eat. Try to use those fuel rewards and, alternate forms of transportation when you're in an area. One thing I didn't realize and kind of learned, a lot of communities, a lot of times they have public transportation and a lot of times it's free. It's paid for by the city or whatever. I'm like, oh, well, why not just take the bus just to, or whatever it might be, because it's free anyway.
Yeah. It must be. I haven't encountered that very much, but that's good. It's good that's
well,
there.
I guess in Loveland and Fort Collins, people have told me that the buses are all free. Nice. And so I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was a thing. So
the place where you live.
Well, yeah, but I'm sure if the place that I live does it, there's other places that do that too. I mean, and even so, taking a bus could be cheaper than driving with the way gas prices are. So.
Yes. Right.
I mean, it just depends on the what time of the year, where gas prices are at that given point in time.
So you'll make some use of it, no doubt.
No, absolutely. I was gonna say, do you have any other final thoughts on saving money before we wrap up?
No, just
I just say save it where you can.
Save, yeah, and just I think we've given everybody a lot of nuggets here, for everything from food to travel to lodging. That's all the main components.
Yep. Yeah, save it wherever you can. All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Callbacks. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening right now. If you're not already subscribed or following, please do. Check out the Facebook group, the Art of Bombing Bomb Squad Facebook group. We post a lot of stuff in there. We got the Facebook page. Do all the things. Support us, and in all the ways that you can. All right, that's going to do it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production.